All right, let's jump into this. America and the rest of the world is a pretty hot topic, right? We're using a podcast script called, well, America and the Rest of the World, a complicated relationship, to kind of guide our deep dive today.
Catchy title.
Yeah, it really grabs you, doesn't it? And it's not just the title. The content is fascinating, too. We're going to go way beyond just, the headlines and sound bites. We really want to understand what's shaping these global power dynamics and why should we even care?
It's easy to get lost in the day-to-day news cycle, but taking a step back, looking at the historical context, that's how we can truly understand America's evolving role on the world stage.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We all know America kind of became this global superpower after World War II.
Right, right. The Marshall Plan, the creation of NATO and the UN, these were major moves that really solidified America's position.
But the world has changed a lot since then. The script mentions globalization as a big factor,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
Oh, there's definitely more. Globalization is huge, don't get me wrong. It's interconnected economies and cultures on a scale we've never seen before. But that very interconnectedness has, in a way, dispersed power globally. No single nation can dominate like they used to.
And in that environment, new players are bound to emerge. China, for example. It feels like every conversation about global power dynamics inevitably turns to China's rise.
And for good reason. China's economic growth has been phenomenal, and its influence is expanding rapidly, especially with initiatives like the Belt and Road. They're reshaping the geopolitical map, that's for sure.
Okay, speaking of the Belt and Road, can you break that down for me a bit? I think I have a general idea, but I'd love to get your take on it.
Sure, it's this massive network of roads, railways, ports, think continents, linking China to economies across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Access to resources, trade routes, projecting economic power. It's all part of the strategy.
So it's like China's building their own version of globalization, with themselves at the center.
Yeah, you could say that. And for many countries who haven't necessarily benefited from the, let's say, Western-led version of globalization, China's approach is attractive. It offers investment development a seat at the table.
Interesting. So where does America fit into all of this? We're still a major economic and military power, but is that enough in this new world order?
It's a good question, and one the script explores in detail. There's this sort of, I don't know, love-hate relationship the world has with America.
Now that you mention it, yeah, you see both admiration and criticism when it comes to America's role on the world stage.
Exactly. American innovation, culture, the opportunities it offers, things like Hollywood, Silicon Valley, these are global forces. And in times of crisis, like the COVID pandemic, the world still looked to America for leadership.
But there's a but coming.
Well, there are also those instances where America's actions have, let's just say, sparked debate. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, for instance, or its stance on climate change.
Right, those are definitely areas where, how to put this, America's pursuit of its own interests might have clashed with global perceptions, right? Which could obviously erode trust.
Yeah, you could say that.
So we've got this complex mix of admiration, criticism, shifting power dynamics, and then there's Russia. The script mentions Russia's resurgence as another factor complicating the global landscape. What's your take on that?
Yeah, Russia's back in the game, asserting its influence in ways we haven't seen since, well, probably the Cold War. This adds another layer of complexity to America's position, especially where their interests, overlap or maybe even collide. It's a delicate balance.
For sure. And then there's the challenges America faces internally. Growing political divide, economic inequalities. Those things don't exactly project an image of stability on the world stage, do they?
It's a valid point. When a country's grappling with internal issues, it can affect its ability to project strength and leadership abroad. Perception matters.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about technology, especially social media. It feels like a single tweet can cause an international incident these days.
It's crazy, right? The immediacy of social media, its reach, it means decisions made in Washington now have these instant global repercussions. That kind of scrutiny, that level of interconnectedness, it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it's like the whole world is watching, analyzing every move America makes.
Pretty much. It creates a whole new set of challenges for American policymakers and, of course, new opportunities too. But it's definitely uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Okay, so we've got globalization, China's rise, Russia's resurgence, internal challenges in the U.S., and the ever-present influence of technology. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And it paints a picture of a world that's dramatically different from, say, the post-World War II era.
Definitely. And this brings us to a concept we hear a lot about these days, the idea of a multipolar world. What exactly does that mean?
Essentially, instead of one superpower calling the shots, we have several major players vying for influence. It's a shift away from that unipolar system that, defined the post-Cold War era with the U.S. as the sole superpower. It's a
Okay,
more,
now go on.
well, a more complex and unpredictable landscape. Alliances become fluid, competition intensifies, and the rules of the game, well, those are constantly changing. It's a whole new ballgame, really. It's a more dynamic system, that's for sure. And for America, it means adapting to a world where hard power alone isn't enough.
You're saying military might isn't the only key to success anymore.
It's part of the equation, sure, but it's not the whole story. In a multipolar world, America needs to leverage its other strengths. Diplomatic capabilities, economic influence, cultural appeal, those are all critical.
So it's more about soft power, building partnerships.
Exactly. Finding common ground with other nations, working collaboratively to address shared challenges, promoting a vision of global order that benefits everyone, not just America. Those are the keys to success in a multipolar world.
That sounds pretty idealistic. Is that even realistic in today's world? There's so much division, so much distrust on the world stage.
It's a challenge, no doubt. But the script makes an interesting point. Even in a multipolar world, there's still a need for global leadership. This might look different than it did in the past.
So instead of one country calling the shots, it's more about collective action, shared responsibility.
Right. Think of it like a team project, where everyone brings their unique strength to the table and works together towards a common goal.
Okay, I can kind of see how that might work in theory.
Mhm.
But are there any real-world examples of this kind of multipolar cooperation actually happening?
Oh, absolutely. The Paris Agreement on climate change is a good example. Nearly 200 countries came together committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It showed that collective action on a global scale is possible, even when there are, significant differences in national interests.
Yeah, that's true. But climate change, well, that's kind of an existential threat. It makes sense that countries would be motivated to work together. What about issues where the stakes aren't quite so high?
There are examples there, too. Think about the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Sure, there were challenges, some missteps along the way, but there was also a remarkable level of international collaboration, especially when it came to things like vaccine development and distribution.
So maybe there's hope for multipolar cooperation after all. But I'm still curious about China's role in all of this. They seem to be playing by their own rules, building their own sphere of influence. How does that fit into a multipolar world?
It's a good question. China is a bit of a wild card, you could say. On the one hand, they are participating in global institutions, engaging in multilateral agreements, seems like they're willing to play a constructive role. But at the same time, they're also very much pursuing their own strategic interests, often in ways that challenge the existing global order.
And the Belt and Road Initiative is a prime example of that, right?
Definitely. It's a bold move, no doubt. But it's important to remember that China's investments often come with strings attached. Recipient countries might find themselves, beholden to China economically or politically, and that can erode their sovereignty, create dependencies.
So it's not always a win-win situation.
Not necessarily. There's been criticism of the Belt and Road, lack of transparency, favoring Chinese companies, saddling countries with unsustainable debt. It's important to look beyond those shiny promises of development. Consider those potential long-term consequences.
That's a good point. It seems like navigating a multipolar world requires a healthy dose of skepticism and critical thinking.
Absolutely. You can't just take things at face value. You have to analyze the motivations of different actors, consider the potential risks and benefits, and think strategically about how to advance your own interests in this complex, constantly evolving environment.
So what does all this mean for the average person? How do these global power shifts, actually affect our daily lives?
It's easy to think these issues are far removed from our everyday concerns, but the reality is they impact everything. The prices we pay for goods and services, the stability of our financial markets, the security of our communities, it's all connected.
So staying informed about global affairs isn't just for, policymakers and academics.
Not at all. We live in a globalized world. Understanding these dynamics, well, it's essential for all of us. It helps us make informed decisions about our lives, our careers, our future.
Right. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. America's changing role in the world, the rise of China, this concept of multipolarity, the challenges and opportunities it presents. Any key takeaways for our listeners?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is this. The world is changing, and America needs to adapt. Clinging to those old paradigms of dominance and unilateralism that just won't work in a multipolar world.
So it's about embracing a more collaborative approach,
Yeah.
building strong alliances, leveraging America's strengths in a way that benefits everyone.
Exactly. Recognizing that in a multipolar world, everyone has a role to play. Cooperation is essential, not optional. It's the only way to address those shared challenges and create a more stable and prosperous future. And that, I think, brings us back to the original script and its central question.
The one about what America's relationship with the rest of the world looks like in this new era.
Right. It's a complicated relationship, to say the least. A mix of admiration and resentment, cooperation and competition, shared interests and, well, diverging priorities.
It's messy.
It is. But moving forward, I think it's crucial to acknowledge the complexities, avoid those simplistic narratives, engage in that thoughtful dialogue about how we navigate this new global landscape.
You're saying nuance is key.
Absolutely. We need to move beyond the rhetoric, focus on finding common ground, building trust, working together to create a more just and equitable world. That's the goal, right?
It is. And for you, our listener, the key is to stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
The future of global cooperation, well, it depends on all of us.
It really does feel like we're at a turning point with all these global shifts happening and America's place in it all. Well, it's definitely uncertain.
Yeah, no doubt. A time of transition. The old rules are, they're being rewritten, and we're all waiting to see how it plays out.
And right in the middle of it all, we have this script asking this big question. What does America's relationship with the rest of the world even look like in this new era? It's something I've been thinking about a lot, especially with all this stuff we've been discussing.
Yeah, it's a huge question. No easy answers. But I think it's the right question to be asking. Keep probing, keep challenging those assumptions. It's important.
So what does this all mean for America then? I mean, the script seems to suggest that America really needs to change its approach to global leadership. How do we even begin to do that?
Well, I think it starts with moving away from that go-it-alone mentality. That's been pretty characteristic of American foreign policy, honestly. It's about recognizing that in a multipolar world, cooperation isn't like weakness. It's a necessity, strategically.
So less about dictating and more about working with partners.
Yeah, exactly. Building those strong alliances, finding that common ground, leveraging America's strengths, sure, but in a way that benefits everyone, not just America itself. That's a key shift.
And maybe it starts with just acknowledging that America doesn't always have all the answers, that other countries, they have valuable perspectives to offer as well.
Humility, right. Humility goes a long way in international relations. It's about truly listening, understanding those concerns, and being willing to compromise.
And maybe recognizing that leadership in this multipolar world, it isn't about dominating others, it's about influence, inspiring others to follow, not forcing them.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a really important distinction. Leadership has to be earned. It's not just imposed. Building that trust, demonstrating competence, and acting consistently with your values.
And for America, I think that means really living up to its ideals, democracy, freedom, justice, at home and abroad,
Yeah, absolutely. And the script touches on this a bit, too. America's internal challenges, they can really undermine its credibility on the world stage. If America wants to be a leader, a truly effective leader in this multipolar world, it needs to address those issues. Political polarization, economic inequality, racial injustice, it all plays a role.
So it's not just about foreign policy then. It's about domestic policy, too.
Yeah, it's all connected. A strong America, a united America, that's a better position to lead globally. But a divided America, that sends a different message,
Yeah.
a message of weakness, instability.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? I mean, what can we do as individuals to navigate all of this complex, ever-changing world?
The first thing is stay informed. Educate yourself about these global issues, read from different perspectives, and talk about it. Have those conversations, even if they're tough.
And don't just accept things at face value, right?
Yeah.
Challenge your own assumptions. Be open to new ideas, listen to others, be critical of the information you come across.
Right. Don't forget, we live in an interconnected world. What we do, it has consequences, locally and globally. When we understand these connections, we can make more informed choices, contribute to a better future, hopefully, more just, more sustainable.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this whole America's place in the world thing, it seems like the message is pretty clear. The world's changing, America needs to adapt, and we all have a part to play in shaping the future.
I think you nailed it. And like the script suggests, the future of global cooperation, well, that's up to all of us. It's a shared responsibility.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking